Welcome to another special edition of the book club. We are here with Mr. Robert Rath.
Hooray!
Hi, Rob.
Hello.
Hi. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. It's our second interview with Rob. And this time, last time we were talking about Infinite and the Divine.
Yep.
This time we're talking about, I'm about to say this and I haven't actually checked, a book that precedes that?
No, the Infinite and Divine was my first and this one was my second.
Rob's second book. Assassinorum, Kingmaker.
I was thinking, are you asking about timeline? Like,
oh, you know, in the history of...
Yeah, and that gets complicated.
Everything.
Yeah. Oh, it's so lovely to have Robert returning because so many people on both our channels absolutely love you. And this book is really, really popular. I think Ian was saying before we came on, people want us to talk to you about this. So thank you for coming back.
So a brief, I'll briefly summarize. Assassinorum Kingmaker is a book about assassins and knights, and the best or worst way to try and kill a big stompy robot. Mm-hmm. And we've just done it on the book club. It's a really popular book, possibly because I guess there aren't a huge amount of knight-focused novels. There certainly aren't a huge amount of assassin-focused novels. Weirdly, when we did the book club on this, the book we'd read just before it was Nemesis by James Swallow, which is like one of the few other assassin-focused novels.
Yeah.
It has a few bits of crossover. So, yeah, I guess like our first question on all of this is usually, you know, how did you come about writing a book of assassins versus knights? Whose idea was that, Rob?
Well, it was sort of, you know, like a lot of these things, you sort of come together on it in the Black Library came to me and said, hey, we're thinking about doing an assassin book. Would you be interested in doing an assassin book? And because I'd done a few things that were a little bit like I did a Warhammer crime novella that was kind of had some action-y elements. I had done an assassin short story. And I said, yes, absolutely. Assassins are one of my favorite things in all of 40K. I love the assassins.
Wow.
So I love spy fiction. So I went, yes, absolutely. That should be my next project, please. And they said, okay, well, we should talk about who, you know, they should fight in this book. And we just threw together a list of the most ridiculously powerful things that we could possibly imagine in 40K of like, they have to kill an Eldar Farseer who can see the future. Like they have to kill, you know, we went through all these possibilities. And the one at the top of the list was a Titan.
Oh yeah.
And,
okay.
It's like, oh, you should kill a Titan princeps. And I was like, well, I kind of like squirmed around with it. And I'm like, that's a good idea, but like, I don't know about that. It's kind of like big. It's really more of a crew than one person. And now I'm talking myself into it because I'm like, what would they do? They'd enter at the feet and fight upwards, you know? And I'm like, oh, that's a good idea. I should write that book.
You need to read that book. You need to write that book now.
I mean, we all know the way
Right.
you crash your shock jump dragster through the energy field into its tank and have your squig eat it.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Also, Mike Brooks had just done it. So and then I was like, well, why don't we scale that down and we have it be a knight? Like that way it's still big, it's still powerful, but there's the one single person that controls it. That person is also a king. And then we get to do weird medieval stuff, fantasy stuff. And that just seems so the Baroqueness of that like Holy Roman Empire period of weird succession crises just seems so Warhammer that basically from there I was like, okay, that's it. Let's do that.
Yeah. I suppose also like knights have a bit more leeway to make a world around. Like when you do Titans can have a personality, but they're also locked into this like, right, we're doing a Mechanicus novel then. And whereas I guess with knights you can just go, right, they're going to be like this.
Yeah, and I think like having a certain set of assassins go into like a certain set of knights, it felt like a more personal thing. So.
But I like the idea that the original impetus is assassin. We're going to do an assassin thing. What do they kill?
Well, like any good spy book, right, is going to be about the target, right? It's like they're going to have to kill someone at a ski lodge in Switzerland, and like that's the setting of the book. You know, it's any good mystery or espionage novel kind of has that element. So Yeah, it makes sense to me that they'll like the story is defined by who they're going after in a
Yeah.
certain way.
But also like so, yeah, I suppose unlike a spy series or like James Bond or something, in this you have to make a load of decisions about how many characters and I said we just came off reading Nemesis, which is like 6 character card. It's basically one of every assassin. In this, you've made some choices.
Yeah.
So we have in this a Vindikar, a Calidus, and a Vanus assassin.
And yeah, bear in mind you just told us you love assassins.
So what's your, how do they get picked?
Well, it's partially practical and partially emotional in that there was I think it was Christmas 1998. I got a gift certificate of like a certain modest amount to go to a hobby store and like, what can I buy with this? And I was looking around and I ended up with a Vindikari assassin, a Calidus assassin, a Codex assassins, and a like a model railroad train water tower that I specifically got so that my Vindikari could sit up there and shoot people. And you know, that next few months I was playing like Warhammer with myself, basically. Like I would do these stories about these two infiltrating my Imperial Guard army to try and take out the commander and stuff like that.
This is
so those two
of
this was what I was 13, 12, 13 around that time. But I have I've always loved those two assassins in particular, but also they're kind of some of the more human assassins. You know, you get into the Eversor. The Eversor is basically like a wind-up doll super weapon. And I thought it would be a little too much to have a Calexis, since they have the whole like soulless thing and, you know, how to integrate them into the team. And I had also previously done a couple of assassin short stories that had Sycorax and Rath in them. And then the Vanus, I had read Nemesis, which I love. I think Nemesis is great. And I really liked the Vanus in there. And they seem to be like a little more mutable sometimes than the other temples with like what they were armed with, what their exact role was going to be. And I wanted to have someone as like a command and control who could like, I've always liked semi-epistolaries or epistolary novels like Dracula. So I wanted to do like this in-universe documents thing, like you were studying the documents along with the assassins. And it made sense to have a character who would be like producing those and like, here's a mimeograph on the culture and succession of Dominion and whatever, you know. So
I mean, Ian was
she ended up being one of my favorites.
Ian was saying, why do all the snipers get to be the bosses? But I think you've explained really well. Like
we all understand what a sniper does, not like a soulless little weirdo.
No, I love the way the team came together, and we got like a lot. What we don't get in a lot of Warhammer books is seeing the team coming together and coalescing and having all the banter. So I really enjoyed that aspect. It felt there were lots of elements that, as you say, felt very spy movie. So getting the team together, having some training time, like, you know, the James Bond room of training. And then I know this is probably going to be in Ian's questions, but the twist when they finally get the head off the knight. It felt so spy-like. So sorry.
Actually, there's a good point in that one of the bits like this story I quite liked, which was really nice, is the bit where you have a gap in between. We're going to do the thing. Now go and start fighting. There's like a bit of actual, we're going to look around in this. It's like a spy novel. Yeah, it is like a spy novel.
Yeah, well, I really specifically wanted to go for these kind of classic, I mean, Warhammer is a very British world, right? And I'm American, so I wanted to make sure I didn't, you know, throw too many kind of American style references into them. And the British spy novel is like a really classic, special kind of thing. So I really wanted to go for more of a sort of Tinker Tailor, Soldier Spy, Frederick Forsyth, Day of the Jackal, like kind of thing, where it's not necessarily just about them doing something. It's about them figuring out how to do it and preparing how to do it and getting into those like weird techno thriller stuff of like, how do you get a message that someone might need to be killed from a planet all the way back to Terra? and like how is that processed and voted on, and there was that kind of novel came out of a reaction to those like 1960s super spy fantasy novels of like, no, this is how you kind of do it, like Spy Who Came In From the Cold kind of thing. But that also came with a thing of essentially the operatives being as afraid of their own organization or more afraid than they are of the enemy.
Yeah.
Which that solved a really great issue I had that I knew I had to tackle, which was like, how was this going to feel different from the Inquisition? So
yes,
like, it's like a little bit more Cold War. It's a little bit more like need to know basis. It's a little bit more not really knowing what your superiors are thinking when they're sending you on this mission.
Yeah, you're not the they're not the instigator of this. They've just been told to achieve it. Yeah, there's a question we were given, which was sort of folds into that a bit, which is how obviously these assassins, when they're written in 40k, there aren't that many assassin novels, right?
No.
And there aren't that many assassin characters. And so they have a tendency to be quite two-dimensional in 40k because they're like, right, that guy's got a gun, she can be your master of disguise, that one's soulless, this one's insane. And how do you go about then figuring out writing in the backstory for a person that's interesting when they're like a hardened killing machine?
And can you adjust that answer, because you've just blown my mind that it was based on a spy who came in from the cold. That makes it so personal, and like the deaths of the little throwaway ones. So was there an element of like giving those names, because obviously a spy who comes in from the cold, you get to meet all the cogs, not all of them make it.
Right.
Some of them are just brought in to be like so how are you doing that world building and building out the characters? And were you going from that British formula, or what else were you bringing?
So, to me, everything has to flow from character. And at least for me personally, character flows from dialogue. So it actually is easiest for me to start from conversations often. And that's why you have these characters that kind of fulfill their role, but like are their role also. Like the liaison, who is kind of personifying that aspect of the Assassinorum when he shows up and goes like, doesn't matter what you're doing right now, I'm not going to tell you my name, I'm not going to tell you who I work for, except you know who I work for. And here's your new mission. We're going to pull you straight out of whatever you were doing. Like, that doesn't matter anymore. We need you for this new thing. And I really wanted to have characters that were very much their archetype, which is, that's a very Warhammer thing, is like the Space Marine or the Chaplain or, the Commissar. But you have those like outer layers of armor kind of, but then you also have like a person that's inside that's sort of like struggling with that armor, or maybe struggling to get out, depending on what kind of role they have. So, you have Colne, who is increasingly sort of having doubts about her role in this organization, and if this organization is going to take care of her, or is just going to cut her loose and get her killed. You have Rath was the hardest. Rath was really difficult until I kind of stumbled on the shoulder injury, the idea of like, he's basically doing what he loves.
We spoke about that, and it was like the tension of the shoulder, like
in many ways.
And it's the scene where he's got one job, and the shoulder's shaking, and I freaking love that.
That was true to life, because I had a double rotator cuff injury, and I was having a very difficult time typing, and I was like,
but your career could have been over.
I know. I was like, do I need to start doing dictation? I had a doctor tell me, stop using a keyboard, start using dictation. I was like, I can't do that. It doesn't work like that. And then I was like, oh, that's his fear, is that he's going to stop being useful. And of course, what happens in the Imperium when people stop being useful, especially in the Assassinorum,
they turn into starch.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. I often find if I'm struggling with a character, what I need to figure out is what they're afraid of. And that's the key to that character. And Sycorax, it's like She's one of my favorite characters ever because I love the Calidus Assassin because it's a really unique role in 40K in that it's someone who talks to the enemy and who doesn't talk to the enemy in like an I'm going to kill you way. They agree with the enemy and try and empathize and understand the enemy, which is really weird as far as 40K things go. You know, and that makes them to a certain extent fairly seem kind of untrustworthy to everyone else, that like, oh, you're gonna blaspheme and you know take part in dark rituals and you know maybe even shoot Imperial servants to try and get close to your target, and that kind of idea of like doing all that without the loss of the self underneath, I found really interesting, and as a result, she's kind of like in many ways the strongest character internally because she has so much practice understanding this is who I am. This is all the stuff I'm doing pretending to be someone else. So in a way, they're opposites, she and Rath, because Rath doesn't really know who he is anymore because he's just been his role for so long. And whereas she has a very strong core and understands that kind of the rest of this stuff is like things that she's to a certain extent in control of.
And I guess also like is therefore more used to working with other human beings.
Yeah.
Right.
I did think
it's also a thing assassins don't tend to get to do very often.
They like to work on their own. But I did think, oh no, if Rob's going to kill all the assassins, because obviously in Nemesis, ain't none of those assassins going anywhere. I thought Sycorax will be the one that's saved because there was she was the coolest. But I was worrying about from the beginning because she just seemed so multifaceted and could do so much. So
also I really enjoyed the bit where you put a Calidus in to do a job that isn't get close to and kill someone. It's like pretend to be somebody. But actually the plot is you need to pretend to be somebody.
Yeah.
That's actually there's a shooty guy to kill people.
And not only you have to pretend to be someone, you're going to need to spend a day remembering a whole genealogical tree, and you've got a horrible parent in the mix.
Which brings us to knights.
Yes.
just gonna drift this conversation around the corner, grab the parking brake.
Yeah, because then we come up to Strider Rao and Dominion. Yeah.
Or the Montagues and the Capulets.
Well, Sycorax is also your for a moment it is, isn't it? Yeah, and also good Sycorax naming. I get that reference. Yeah, the only name from the Tempest not currently used in 40K. Yeah.
Wow.
Except for the planet Sycorax, which I forgot about.
Yeah. Oh god. So you also get to create Dominion, create a Knight House. We haven't seen a lot of those in the lore. Weirdly, in the lore, that you tend to see knights a bit more when they're Mechanicum knights, which isn't really the same thing. They're like wandering around on Mars or something.
Yeah.
Like, that's great. We're always taught about like, oh yeah, there's obviously they have night worlds, and these night worlds are feudal and they work in a certain way. Yeah. How did you enjoy coming up with your semi-Arthurian, semi-Wars of the Roses, semi-hereditary conflict night world?
Please spill all the secrets around this. It's so rich in literally like intertextuality. Like you need to tell us all the stuff.
Yeah, well, I've always been really fascinated by particularly the Holy Roman Empire in that they have this very weird kind of election of the emperor, and you can be the king of Germany, but you're not the Holy Roman Emperor, until you're elected, and then the Pope gives you his blessing, and like there's all these politics around it. And I did, think about sort of Romeo and Juliet, and like, well, what happens after Romeo and Juliet? What if they have to like share, and just figure out a way to get along with, both sharing like this like power sharing agreement essentially. There was a world in one of the Imperial Knights codexes, I forget which one it was, but that was similar, that they had like half the world was one house, half the world was the other house, and then they shared a king. And I went, oh, that's a really cool idea. Let's play with that a little bit. And how would you have a king that you're sharing when both sides absolutely loathe each other? and not only that, but are kind of like culturally incompatible to a certain
Mm.
extent. Or I wouldn't say that, actually. I would say that they're constantly defining themselves against each other, in the same way, like if you read about the history of the UK, it's always like France, of like, what is Britain? We are not France. You know, and Japan and China are very similar. That a lot of Japan's self-conception is like, China does this and we do that, you know, and we borrow some things, but then we you know, have things that are unique. And I love writing culture clash. Culture clash is one of my favorite things to write. I grew up in Hawaii, which is a place that is, you know, a huge melting pot of cultures. So, you know, I grew up with this idea that there are kind of like other cultural worlds out there, and like people who are going to do things differently. And when you go over to their house, you're playing by their rules. And you know, and then of course I'm an American who lives in Hong Kong for the past 11 years. So I wanted to throw the Assassins into this very complicated cultural framework that they just had no basis for, and see them like try and get along, and need an advisor to get them through. But and I there's also everything also with me has to have like a little bit of personal stake to it. If I can't relate to the same way I couldn't relate to Rath until I thought, like, you know what? His fear is that he's not going to be able to be an operator anymore, that he's injured, and that this is never going to get better. And, you know, I grew up with divorced parents, and I grew up with that feeling of like, these are two different families. They are extremely different from each other, and they don't like each other anymore.
And now I'm understanding the amazing prickly conversations between the two sides. Now I'm understanding. I thought that was, you know, you said you build character from kind of dialogue. That dialogue was so tense to read. I was like, ooh.
Yeah, so it's like, and that's, you know, that's a pretty common experience. Or even if you have parents that stay together, to have like two separate families that maybe don't like each other all that much. So I thought, what's, you know, how messed up would it be if you had a line of succession that were all like divorce kids that are, you know, constantly being torn between one side and the other, and some of them do side with one, some of them do the other, some of them try and stay in the middle, and those are probably the ones that you should put on the throne. But like, they're all going to be pretty psychologically battered by the time they get there.
There's also a lovely idea of like, because the dual job of the assassins, right, is the assassin one, kill the king, and then sort out a good replacement, which of course is then like, great, you weird loner snipers, try and figure this out.
I love.
Let's find the least broken of these broken toys.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot going on, Robert, in terms of like, we find out stuff. I guess I'm thinking of like all those John le Carré books where we find out what we think is a big reveal, and then there's like a, what do you mean?
Oh yeah.
Like, so for example, we're so invested in these assassins, we want them to win. She's locked down and learned like a whole year's worth of like information. They finally get to the target.
It's only halfway through the book.
It's only halfway through the book, but the target is already dead. Sorry, spoilers, anybody. We should put a warning at the beginning of this. But like, so I mean, that whole conceit, and is that the spy thriller thing, or did you know from the beginning you just want it to be incredibly twisty?
Yeah, well, you know, any spy novel has to have a good twist, and I in the beginning was like, okay, here's. I also was a little worried about trying to. Well, we had to have room for the succession struggle, right? So clearly, you know, Yuvarius Cow has to die in the middle so that we have room for all the rest of the stuff. But you know, then if that just happened, if they killed him, you could make a second half of the book where everyone's doing an assassin hunt, basically. But more fun if they get there and he's already gone. And you know, or your whole basis for understanding what's going on changes. And And it also like throws in the question, which I wanted people to ask, of like, how much have the assassins actually solved this situation?
The
Would
classic,
it have actually been better had they never showed up?
classic
You know?
40k question, that.
Right.
I mean,
About an awful lot of 40k. Would it have been better if everyone had just not done anything?
I mean,
Yeah,
it did allow you to go crazy silly with a string of like comical deaths
Yeah,
where someone
like
is
the guy getting
digested
by a
by
snake.
by a snake, someone is in a carriage, and then all of a sudden the carriage is ambushed. I mean, I thought that was very cinematic. You know, you kind of suddenly split to all these scenes, and I was imagining the succession list, just all the names being crossed off. Was that great fun for you to write?
Oh, loved it. Yeah, I frequently will have, well, for 2 books now, because I did this one, Infinite the Divine, I'll have sections that have very short, like punchy, you know, in Infinite the Divine, it was when they're stealing the Mysterios back and forth between each other.
Yeah, that was
and I kind of wanted to do a similar thing again, but also, you know, I didn't want to have an assassin book where they only assassinated one guy, one or two monarchs. So I was like, this is a great way to have like a bunch of characters. They could assassinate them a whole bunch of different ways. We could just have everyone doing their thing, like, and kind of see the fun of all the, you know, have them get unleashed for a little bit. And also kind of have them start coming together as a team and recognizing each other's how valuable each other are. And sort of, you know, this is again very dark, but like kind of start having fun together on this murder spree.
it was a good bonding exercise, I feel. I mean, I loved that aspect, which again, quite often, you know, I'm always looking out for in 40k novels, where you see this kind of unlikely, you know, group come together and start to mesh and care about each other. I thought it was done in a really lovely way. Yeah.
And then of course we get to Leviathan.
Leviathan
and our heroic Green Knight, which is fantastic to see. I feel like was there an inspiration for them? I feel like I've seen like soggy knights occasionally, and like really there's some golden demon entries that are like really, and I don't know if I imagine there's been more since this book, but that's sort of like, yeah, wading through I'm not going to say Pacific Rim, but wading through the water, sort of like dredging up seaweed sort of idea of a knight.
I mean, everything about that reveal was amazing as well, wasn't it? The secret cave and everything. Sorry, I'll stop. You go ahead, Robert.
No. I was always growing up. Again, I grew up in Hawaii, so there's like a lot of Japanese culture around there. I grew up with like a lot of, you know, old monster movies with big monsters coming out of the ocean and stuff like that. So again, like I have lived on islands most of my life, so I always want there to be an ocean, and I want, you know, to involve the sea in some way. And it just seemed obvious to me also, because I wanted it to be a Knight Valiant, and a Valiant has a harpoon, so there it seems like a little nautical already. I just wanted to have a big moment where suddenly like it's just there, and we've not seen a Dominus class knight other than the Throne of Dominion, slash, because it changes. But just to have a lot of fun with, you know, a big like robot fight, you know, and contrasting the footmen and like trying to fight these things as footmen, and then suddenly like another one comes out, and it was very, very fun. I enjoyed that so much. I haven't built my own Leviathan yet. I haven't, but I did. I got a bunch of knights for research because I needed to know like, how they moved and like where the armor panels were.
Did you have like a night allowance? Did you go Games Workshop like take whatever you want, Robert?
No, but I will say, I mean, I did get some of the big 40k sized ones, and I do have a knight arm. I'm right around Knight Army now, but which I'm nowhere near finished painting. But I did get a lot of the little Adeptus Titanicus ones.
Oh yeah,
because those were a lot easier to have like a whole line of them in all the different configurations for reference.
I'm aware that just below the camera there, you have the official post Assassinorum Strider Rao armigers.
They're not done. Let me take the top off. I'm going to clearly knock this over and destroy everything.
Oh, fantastic!
So
Yeah,
pretty.
Those are closer to done than the others, but yeah, I did get the chance to face off against Mike Brooks' orcs with them.
Really?
At one point. And true to brutal cunning, the knights were very badly smashed.
Can you imagine like the games banter around the table with these two writers?
I have the sneaky feeling that Mike Brooks is actually like an incredibly good 40k player.
He is. He's an extremely
I can sort of tell. You're like,
at least compared to me. I'm very like narrative play, you know, like I'm gonna make robot noises while they like stomp around and create reasons for why this is a great scene, even though I'm getting blown up. This is what happens when you grow up doing 2nd edition Imperial Guard, which is not an army that you play to win with.
No. Yeah. There with you. Yeah. I asked for questions. I've got some questions. I've got 2, I think, funnish ones. The first one, right? We were picking up on the obvious sexual tension between Absalom Wraith and Sycorax. Are we? Is the first question. And when you do that, do you ever get any pushback on that sort of thing from like, you know, I know either fans or maybe a Games Workshop going, yeah, we don't really do that, Rob. We don't really do. See, especially because now they've got this Warhammer horror label that we're all very convinced is a romance label.
Yeah.
You know, I think they're leaning into it a bit more.
Well, for the first part of the question, like the first way to ruin a will they or won't they is to say anything. So no comment on that. You know, I think there have been a lot of really fun kind of romance B or C plots, like in Black Library already. I mean, Gothgul Hollow, which you read, is fantastic. If Mira, you absolutely have. I'm giving you homework. Sorry. You absolutely have to read Honor Bound by Rachel Harrison.
Oh yeah,
which is Severina Rain, who's a commissar, and she's not like a gaunt commissar. She's like a commissar.
Yeah.
But there's some kind of feelings that crop up in that too.
Okay. Have you read that, Ian?
I haven't. We did Death Welder. Death Welder as well has quite a good romance B plot.
Who wrote
Creed Ashes of Cadia, also by Jude Reed, which is excellent.
Yeah.
We need to make a list. These are like, we need to do romantic. There's Valentine's
things
ones
that should be in Warhammer romance.
Yeah. So who wrote Honor Bound, Rob?
Rachel Harrison. And she also wrote Mark of Faith, which also has like kind of like a subtle. All of these like fantastic. Like Creed Ashes of Cadia, which, you know, is close to my heart because in some ways it like ties into it's Berserker Creed's daughter.
Yeah.
So like I did Creed in Fall of Cadia, and then Jude did Ursula Creed. And it's great.
I read Fall of Cadia a few months back as well, so you can catch up on that, and then we can be back with Rob again.
I mean, at some point we need to show Rob our essential reading piles.
Oh yeah.
Which just if we fall asleep at the wrong time, we will be crushed under them. But if a Black Library author tells us we got to read something, we got to read it.
So traditionally, right, this is the bit where you have to like ask a Black Library author what they're working on, which no one can ever say. But a better question is, what are you reading right now? What have you been? Because you've been reading a lot of Black Library. You're up to date.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm reading Longshot by Rob Young, which is really great and has a really fun view of the Tau in it. I've finally can get back to reading Cadian stuff because I had to detox after Fall of Cadia for a little bit. I couldn't do Cadians for a bit. But now that I've done Creed Ashes of Cadia, which is also fabulous, and Longshot, I'm getting out of that Cadian post-Cadia slump finally. But the thing I'm really looking forward to right now is Above and Beyond by Denny Flowers. I was a big fan of Outgunned.
I haven't read either.
I can't wait. It's great. It's a aeronautica book. It's about pilots, but the main character is a propaganda filmmaker that is making a propaganda film about this famous fighter ace, and is kind of like finding out that she's not quite what he thought, and is sort of struggling about how to make a a decent but kind of like true propaganda film about this aerial conflict with the orcs. It's really neat.
Have they learned nothing from the fates of the remembrances in the heresy? Any journalist, they don't want you to.
Journalist apparently makes it to a second book.
Oh, okay, but one of the first rules about being a journalist is try not to find anything out. But we'll have to. This is like a big long list we're getting from you, Rob.
That's right. It's going to keep us going.
Yeah, that's the thing about being a 40K author is you start out as a 40K fan, and then you're like reading everything because you're like, this is research, and also I'm really enjoying it.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, thanks, Rob. That's all fantastic. It's really interesting. We absolutely love the book. I'm sorry it's so late. We probably should have done it when it came out, like a year a bit ago.
Thank you very much.
But no, it's absolutely fantastic to read. It was actually really nice to be reminded of when you read it.
Yeah, I think we need to keep closer tabs on Mr. Rath, and when he's in London, we'll just have to come and make sure that we keep you in our sights, keep you up to date, and then as soon as anything emerges, we can just throw it onto your channel.
Yeah. Do you have any dark secrets you're at liberty to reveal?
Nope.
Okay, good.
Again, why would I ruin the surprise? Why would I ruin the surprise?
Brilliant. Well, lovely to speak with you again. It's always a pleasure. And we loved it. We really, really enjoyed our jaunt into Dominion and the world of spooky murder assassins.
Yeah.
Thank you. Always so fun to be here.
Yeah. Well, we will see you next time when we finally get Mira to go through the whole of Fall of Cadia.
I'll see you in
a couple of
2037. Here we go.
Words, so
it's really good. It went a lot quicker than I was expecting from a book that big. It's really fantastic. And we'll see you next time, Rob.
Thanks, Rob.
Yeah. See you later. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much.
Bye.